willingness to share your life with us today. We are delighted to have you with us at God's meeting. At this time, help me give a warm welcome to Patty from Santa Clarita, California. Her home group is the Sponsee Meeting. Welcome, Patty, and over to you.
Hey, everybody, I'm Patty J, and I'm an alcoholic. You guys are organized. This is awesome. Great seeing everybody. Welcome to all the newcomers and all of my people who know me that are on here. Just really appreciate the support. So let's get right to it. My sobriety date is 10/23/1988. I've been sober 34 years. Thank God for that. And when Tamara asked me about a topic, I was like, oh man, I usually share what it used to be like, what happened, what it's like now. And it was God shots came up because I was asked to facilitate a retreat, and that was the topic. So I figured we'll talk about that here too, since it was fresh and the retreat was just the last weekend or so. And what that is all about. So most of the time, what I had over the years, for my first 15, 16, 17 years of sobriety, I missed a lot of the God shots that were happening because I was so focused on some of the things that I felt like I always need to check myself out. I always need to make sure I'm not selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid. I need to watch my behavior. I was always watching myself. So I was getting this feeling that I always had to see what was wrong with me. And I always had to be on top of it. And I always had to watch my behavior, my resentments, and things of that nature. So I was kind of getting in a slump. And I realized that in all of the searching and all of the work that we do here, for me personally, I'm talking about me, everybody has a different experience. I realized that the undertone of the meeting was starting to affect me because I was feeling like I always look at what's wrong with me, my behavior, what I shouldn't do, what I didn't do, and I feel bad about this, and always monitoring myself. And it affected my concept of God, right? It accepted my concept of God because I felt like I was missing all of the power that I was getting from my higher power, like the God shots, because I'm so looking at myself that I'm ignoring and not seeing all of the many power that the higher power is giving me to stay sober, right? So if I'm always looking at what's wrong with me, and if I'm always looking at what's wrong with you, and my head is always focused on selfishness, honest, self-seeking, and afraid, or I'm looking at things just to make sure I act right and try to be a productive member of society and represent Alcoholics Anonymous, my self-centeredness can be in that as well. I can be so self-centered that I miss that there's so many powerful things that God has given me that I could miss out on the big blessing of the fourth dimension of existence that we've been given here, right? So the way that it works for me, and I'll tell you a bit of my story too and mix it all in, I have these thought processes, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home, whatever it is, I create these charts in my head. And it has to match, like my wife has to act like this. And if she doesn't follow the chart, then it's a problem. At work, they got to act like this. And if they don't follow the chart, and I found and I discovered that I had all these charts in my life because it says practice these principles in all of our affairs. But I was setting up these charts where I was blocking the power of God. And I even had a chart for God. So I would say these prayers, but I would have a connection and a condition on how the power is supposed to work in my life, right? And I didn't even realize I was doing it. Just one day, I just knew that I was blocked, and there were some things that I couldn't see because everything, the little ducks need to stay in place. Don't move, stay in your place, because if you don't go the way that I think you should go, then there's a problem. So I saw that my ego had rebuilt itself even in working steps 10 and 11 and 12. Because I'm so focused on seeing selfishness, honest, self-seeking, and afraid, looking at reviewing my day to where it was just all about, even though I would see some behaviors, I was missing God in the process. So let me set the scenario up for you. I got sober in 1988, right? And I go all the way back to my story, and I'll jump around so you can see when I'm talking about God shots. First, I have to look at, where do I not see God? Where am I missing God to get the shots, right? How do I see the God shots if I'm only focused on what I think I'm supposed to focus on? So I had a whole overhaul of myself, and let me go back to the beginning of my story. This is what I was thinking, because I was feeling myself disconnecting from the program, because I'm like tired of looking at myself. I'm tired of this and I'm tired of that. The ego was even centered in that, defeating the purpose, deep-rooted self-centeredness. The big book talks about that, or the talks about that. Uh-oh, did y'all hear that, the recording? But anyway, the big book talks about the soul sickness, right? And I found myself wrapped up in my soul sickness, even though I was practicing the steps. So I wasn't really, feeling happy, joyous, and free. If there was an elephant in a room, that something was missing, right? So going back to when I was born, I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, lived in the ghetto, Watts, Compton. I'm from the hood, right? And I had this mother that kept us in church all the time. So growing up, I found out at the age of 13 that I was basically given to the family friend. So my mom was married, my dad was married, they had an affair, she got pregnant with me. He didn't want to lose his wife, she didn't want to lose her husband, so they gave me to the family friend who they thought couldn't have kids. And that's what happened with me. I found that out at 13 years old. So as I'm growing up in church, my mom kept me in church, I had to sing in choirs. I won't go into all of that, because we're looking at a lot of the stuff that I missed. I started developing this idea about my life. I started developing all this stuff about how I see and my perception and conceptions of what I believe. I started developing these things, even though my mom had me in church trying to keep me out of trouble. So when I turned 18 and I got my first job at Taco Bell 28, I was making my tacos. I was making $3.35 an hour. I feel like I'm grown now. I started drinking California Coolers, pink champagne, doing a little other party favors that we don't talk about in here. I was, no more church, no more Jesus, no more choirs. It's like I'm set free. I'm making my own money. I started working at Taco Bell. So at Taco Bell is when I got introduced to drinking, when I got introduced to other stuff, right? So even in the midst of that, I'm moving away from the church. I'm moving away from all this other stuff, and I'm getting into the streets. To make a long story short, I started getting bad. It just got worse. I started hanging with people from the choir, and we started getting high together. It doesn't make sense, but there are people in the choir that I was a part of that drank and did other stuff. So as I'm hanging out with these people, I'm starting to go to clubs. I'm doing all of this stuff, and I end up really bad with my drinking and other behaviors. So I won't go into the details of that because we're talking about God shots. So you say, well, how is this important? So that whole years, all those years when my mom saw me hitting the streets, she kept me and my brother on the prayer list. Sometimes I have an idea of how I think this higher power works. Sometimes I can even defeat myself when I think that I can define this higher power, because I can limit the power that it really gives me if I define it, right? And I limit what it can do, not just for me, but through other people for me, right? So at 21 years old, my mom decided that they were going to put me in a recovery house. So I go into this recovery house, and the first God shot with this was, I always drank and used every day. Every day. If I could get drunk, I could do it. I just did it every day. One day, my mom told me, hey, you need to be at this bus stop. If you want to go into this recovery facility, we have a place for you to go to get some help. I won't go into the details of what I was doing, but you could just tell it was really, really bad. So she said, you need to meet me at this bus stop so we could put you in this recovery house. And I was like, okay, I'm getting high. I'm drinking. I'm in the streets. I'm not coming home for days. I'm missing for days. I'm just out there. But that morning, somehow I made it to the bus stop. It's like when I look back over it over the years, it's like, how did I make it to that bus stop when I never was able to? I didn't respond to her phone calls. I didn't respond to my mom's knocking on doors. I had pagers back then. So some of you young people don't know what a pager is. We used to have pagers in the 80s. And you dial the number and it go beep, 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 beep. You can have your little beep on there, and you could put little codes in there. So you could put the phone number, and then behind the phone number, you could put 911. Or you could put behind the number 411. That meant information. You see, you young people don't know about this, all this modern stuff. It's okay. It was old school. You still had a beeper, but I had to run to the payphone on the street to dial a number. It was crazy. Until we came out with the big old flip phones that cover your big old head, right? So anyway, I made it to the bus stop. Now, the God shot is that I was able to walk away from the alcohol, walk away from the other stuff I was doing, and get to the bus stop. I didn't pray. I wasn't asking God. Something was working on my behalf to get me to that bus stop. I get to the bus stop. My mother picks me up. They take me to the recovery house. I get into the recovery house. Okay. The other God shot was that is that I get into the recovery house and I actually stay there. It's like, how did I do that? Because in and of myself, I drink. In and of myself, I do other stuff. And these aren't the things that I think about all the time. And there's so much God and higher power in that, right? So I get to the recovery house. And of course, in the recovery house, if you know what a recovery house is, it was a co-ed place, and they get you into the steps. They get you in touch with your feelings. You got to have a counselor. They take you to meetings. They try to work on your, internal stuff, like try to just get you. There's a whole lot of things they do. They introduce you to the 12 steps, all of these things. So by this time, I'm 21 years old, and I'm in this recovery house, right? And I'm learning about Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm learning about the big book, and I'm learning all this stuff. But in this recovery house, when I went in there, I was defeated. I felt like I was ready to change my life. I was so glad that my mom got me into this recovery house. But it's real easy. After I was there the first week, I started learning the lingo. They had the steps on the wall. I started memorizing the steps. I started figuring out, okay, keep coming back. It works if you work it one day at a time. You start picking up all of these lingo. And they had meetings and stuff. So you go to meetings, you learn, about the coffee commitments and sponsorship and all of this stuff. So what ends up happening is about 2-3 weeks later, without going into a whole lot of detail of that, because we're talking about God shots, it was like I was in this recovery house. I became a secretary. I started crying about my parents giving me away to the family friend. I started getting in touch with feelings. I started acknowledging my alcoholism. So I'm seeing all this stuff. Now I'm in this recovery house for 60 days. I was supposed to stay there 90 days, right? And on the 60th day, I was given an offer of a job. And I was supposed to stay 90 days, but by the time the 60th day came, I'm in this facility, right? I could leave if I want to, but I don't. I stayed there 60 days. Unbelievable that I didn't get loaded or drank or anything for that whole time. So I get this job, and I'm supposed to stay there 90 days. In the facility where I'm at, I'm doing what I call riding dirty. Now I'm in the facility. I'm having an affair with some chick inside the place that I don't even know her last name. We're jumping over the fence and we're going to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken when I'm supposed to be eating the facility food. And then I'm lying in the meetings looking good so you can think I'm a great AA'er. I start quoting the book. I start doing all of this stuff. I call that perpetrating. So the 60th day, when it was time for me to leave the facility and I left to go get this job, the night I left the facility, I got drunk. I got drunk the night I left the facility. And of course, it got worse, never better. It's like, how you in a facility for 60 days, reading the big book, learning about the 12 steps, acknowledging my alcoholism, acknowledging the thinking, but then I leave the facility with no alcohol in my system, just getting all the help that I need. And I go get drunk that night. It's like something is wrong with that, but I don't see that there's something wrong with that in the moment, right? So I get out the car, I'm drunk, I'm back. And so another year go by, and it's got worse, never better. None of the stuff that I learned in the facility did I ever even think about. So here comes another God shot for me. And if I stay grounded in these God shots, then I can really see, and it's going to make me cry, if I pay attention, that I do not keep myself sober. There's a power greater than me that keeps me sober because I'm incapable of doing it, even with the information that I have, right? So into this whole thing where I relapsed and I got loaded again after I left the facility, in the meantime, there's always something working for us. And I believe that for me personally. My dad, he got in trouble for some DUIs. He got arrested. He had to go to jail. Then they made him go to DUI school. So he had gotten his second DUI. Now, at this point, I'm getting homeless. I can't stop drinking. I'm out there in the streets. So my dad, in the meantime, while I'm out there riding dirty and drinking a mess, the courts are working on my father. The courts are working on my father. My mother still had me on this prayer list at church. Everybody praying for me. And so my dad, I end up telling him, hey, I'm on the street, I'm homeless, I need somewhere to go. I'm losing everything. And he says to me, well, you could come back home, but if you come back home, you got to go to AA. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to AA, long as I can get somewhere to sleep. So now my dad, he gets 2 years. He's 2 years sober at this time, right? So it's amazing how all of it worked out, where my dad ended up getting sober. He got 2 years. Then I was able to go back to his house, and he encouraged me to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. You need to get back in. So that's the other guy's shot. I wasn't praying. I wasn't asking. Something was working on my behalf to get me back again, right? And I think about Bill and Bob in the beginning sometimes, how they all, there's a whole lot about the history. You guys probably know a whole lot more than I do, but how miraculous it was how this worked out for them, right? Something happened where he got this idea, one alcoholic working with another, and there's a whole lot of stuff that happened, but some divine intervention was manifesting for Bill and all of those folks back in the day for this whole thing to happen where we're a part of right now. So that whole thing was working for them, it's working for me too, right? I don't see that. So my dad, he's got me going back to meetings in order to live in his house. So I said, okay. So I start going to meetings and I'm going back. So at this point, I'm like 23 years old. And I'm like, I'm comfortable with being gay now. I don't have to worry about the church people saying I'm going to hell. I have to worry about none of that. It's like I'm out gay because I'm grown and I'm doing my thing. So I start going to gay meetings, right? I start going to gay meetings. So to make a long story short, in these meetings, I'm not working the steps. I'm not doing anything but taking chips and maybe have a commitment, and they're clapping. You get your 30-day chip, your 60-day chip, your 90-day chip. I'm all into that. I'm into the dances and all of that stuff, right? God shot number 5, right? There's a gang of God shots, but this is the one that I want to point out to you. I'm sitting in the meeting, and there was this old timer. I'm only going to the meetings because my dad is giving me a place to live, but somehow miraculously stay sober. I'm only praying at the meeting when I say the serenity prayer, or when the meeting closes and it's the Lord's Prayer. I'm only praying then. It's like I'm not even asking still, right? I'm having moments of stuff, but I'm into the dances. I'm into chasing girls at the meeting. I'm into all of that. So coming up on my first year of sobriety, there was an old timer in the meeting. And back when I got sober, we were scared of old timers, right? So one of the biggest God shots I got is when this old timer, man, and I wish I could find her. I always pray that God to send her my way. I don't know if she's dead or what. But this lady, man, she used to always mess with me. I don't know why I'm crying so much, but and she came to me. I was coming up on a year of sobriety. She came up to me and she said, you know what, Pat? You in this meeting and you're playing around. You need to get yourself together or you're going to be relapsed. You're going to relapse and you're going to be on the street. We have to work the steps. There's stuff we have to do here. You need to stop going to these gay meetings and go to these straight meetings where you can pay attention. Because in here, you're just playing. And she scared the holy hell out of me. I know I'm not supposed to cuss. But she scared me, man. And I started going to these straight meetings. And I wish I could find that lady. It always gets to me because I wonder where she is. But I started going to these straight meetings. And that was another God shot. I don't know why she scared me. I don't know why I listened to her. But I started to go to these straight meetings. And she said, sit in the front of the room and listen. And introduce yourself. Now, I was afraid because I was like, I'm gay. They all straight. This is my head. My head is telling me they all straight. They give me, I've got all these stories right in my head. But I go to the meeting anyway. And in that meeting, I meet this girl. So to make a long story short, because we're still seeing how this power is doing for me what I can't do for myself, right? So I get to this meeting, and at the meeting, make a long story short, I end up meeting this girl because she was all fine and I was going to chase her around. And because I started chasing her at this meeting, she was going to another meeting at a big book study at another recovery house. And because I was chasing her, I went to the big book study with her, right? So I started working the steps because I'm chasing her. I really don't care about the big book, but I wanted to impress her that that's what I want to do. And so that's how I got into the steps. One more time, God do it for me what I can't do for myself. Who would have thought? Because sometimes I have to be careful to what I say to newcomers. It's like, don't be doing this, don't be doing that, you should do this, you should do that, all these rules, right? But if I look at my life, I can see where there was a lot of things that manifested for me through Alcoholics Anonymous with my higher power working, where I can't even figure out how I even stayed here. So I try to be careful with telling people what to do and what not to do, because I don't know what their power is doing for them, right? So I go to this meeting, I start working the steps with this guy because I'm trying to keep this girl, which was crazy. And we started going through the big book. Now we're going through the big book, and I'm not really paying attention to him. We went through the forwards, through the doctor opinion, line by line, word for word. He had me looking up things in the dictionary. He had me highlight this, how do you feel about that? Then we read the doctor's opinion, and I forget where it is, but he said, read the sentence. And it said, you have a craving beyond your mental control. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, let me explain what that means for you where you can understand it. He says, when you take a drink, can you just have one drink? I said, no. He said, well, what do you do when you take a drink? I said, I keep drinking. He said, what do you do when you do other stuff? I said, I just keep doing it. He goes, why? I go, I don't know. I just keep doing it. He goes, okay, let me give you an example. If it's Thanksgiving Day, you're drinking, and your mother pages you 911 to come to the house because everybody's at the house waiting for you to have Thanksgiving dinner. Do you stop drinking to go to the house to be with the family? And I said, no. He said, why not? It's your mom. She's saying 911. Somebody could be dead. Anything could be happening. I said, I don't know. I just want to keep drinking. And he said, so this example for you is this. The real thing that you need to do, your head is telling you your mom is calling you 911. Okay, you should put the alcohol down and go see what mama wants. But you don't do that. You keep drinking. The main problem centers in your mind rather than in your body. And it messed me up. I said, oh man, it's like my brain, and the way I took it was my brain don't work enough to get me to do the right thing. It keeps me drinking. And we call that the allergy. The allergy kicked in because he didn't tell me about the allergy until we read further on. But then that's how it clicked. And I got scared. And I was like, that's when I woke up. So here it is now. I'm like, 2 years sober. And now I really see that I need a power greater than myself to keep me sober because nothing can stop me from drinking. My mama can't stop me. My daddy can't stop me. 911 can't stop me. If I'm drinking, I don't give a heck about what's going on. I'm going to keep drinking and I'm going to keep doing whatever. And I got to see in my mind, yeah, it's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my thinking. So because of him, I worked the steps. So I'm going to move on. I got involved in the steps. So it wasn't about the girl anymore. It became about, I want to work this program. I want to do this work. So I get into the work and I'm, really committed to the steps. And I'm a part of going to meetings. I'm a part of sponsorship. I'm being sponsored. I have commitments and all of this stuff. But I still have issues with my behavior, right? So I can see all of the God shots that have gotten me to where I'm at. But I get involved in the big book and I'm learning all of this stuff. So I was that person, to make a long story short, coming up on 13 years of sobriety, where by this time I'm that person in the room that's like arrogant, that self-knowledge person, that I have knowledge of the book, but I'm only applying about 3 of the steps myself. Okay, I got knowledge of the book. I'm telling you what to do as a newcomer. You do this. If you don't sound like you've worked the steps out of the big book, then I'm that person in the room that's saying, what page is that on? Where did you learn that? That's not in our books. I'm that arrogant person that people hate in the meeting sometimes. That became me in my 13th year of sobriety. But the thing about the sickness of that is that I was riding dirty. And what I mean by riding dirty, I had payday loans all over the place. I was broke financially. I cheated in relationships. I was doing a lot of good things in sobriety, like following the things that people were telling me to do, but I still had behaviors that were not good, right? And I realized in that 13th year of sobriety, it's another big God shot. Thank God I didn't get loaded and I didn't drink, because coming up on that 13th year of sobriety, it all crumbled. It all crumbled. I was getting in trouble having to go to check systems, which is check systems is a thing where you basically get an infraction or a misdemeanor offense because you've been bouncing checks too much. In a relationship I was coming out of, I had cheated so much, I got caught cheating, everything, all hell was breaking loose in my 13th year of sobriety. Sat down with my sponsor. My stepmom had passed away. I had $20 in my pocket. I was broke and I was just a mess. And I sat there with my sponsor, and my sponsor pointed out to me, he was like, okay, now you need to start working and applying all of the steps. Knowing the steps is great, but application is important. And it tripped me out because I had been sponsoring people and I wasn't doing some of the things that I'm telling these people to do, right? So nothing but the grace of God kept me sober during that time. And it was all about when I did some work, and I'll go into that. I won't even go too much into that because I want to move on to the next part, is that what I found out with the money thing, I'll tell you about the money thing. The money thing that I discovered was I never allowed the higher power to be a part of the financial part of the work that I did, right? So fear of economic insecurity will leave us, right? I never addressed that. So I knew what I'd learned from the streets. I was just still riding dirty. Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get some money like this. I'm staying sober, but this is what I'm going to do, right? Fear of people and economic insecurity would leave us. I was riding dirty financially because I had a whole lot of ideas about finances that I didn't even address through the steps. Never even talked about it. Made it a separate issue. Then as far as like the sex stuff, being a cheater, I wrote inventory after inventory after inventory, right? Inventory, sex inventories, and all of that stuff. And I would see the truth about my sex ideals through the sex inventory. I would see the truth about my resentments. And I would get up after reading a fifth step on that stuff and still do the same thing. What do? You pretty, you make me look good, let's go. The rest don't matter. It's all about you cute. It's all about you make me look good. Let's go. I don't care. And no equally yoked, none of that stuff that I even think about, right? It was kind of like, I don't even want to be with you if you got bad kids, if your money is funny. But I didn't create and talk about none of that in my sex inventory. I just was like, all I care about is how you make me look on the outside. I got a lot of reliance on things outside of me, right? And that's what dominates me. So it made sense that I couldn't stay faithful in a relationship. It made sense that I wasn't going to treat the money as a financial blessing from a higher power. And what's so cold about the finances is that when it came to the money part, I never, when I was drinking and using, able to keep money in my pocket. Wasn't ever able to do it, right? So this higher power makes it where if I get $5, I didn't go buy liquor. I would get $5. I'm sober. I'm at McDonald's getting me a Big Mac. It'll make sense for an alcoholic like me to take $5, $10 and go buy a Big Mac. To me, it's like, let's go get a drink. Let's go get some other stuff. But my mind had been transformed. The big book talks about old ideas being replaced with new ideas. Next thing I know, I care about hamburgers and food and going to the movies and going skating and going bike riding as opposed to let's go to the hood and get a drink. Right? It's like I didn't transform myself. Something transformed me. Right? Something happens with my thinking. So to speed it up, I think you guys are getting the idea of how it's so easy to miss God, your God shots, if I focus on the wrong things. So moving a little further along, as I started like realizing what I was doing, I made a change. I made a commitment to work in steps 10, 11, and 12. Not just knowing them, but applying them, right? So the 12 and 12 talks about too, I don't know, like the 12 and 12, I won't go into all of them, the deadly sins, for not religiously, I don't look at them that way. Sin is defined for me as missing the mark. So, gluttony, envy, all of that stuff, greed, and all of that stuff that's talked about in the 12 and 12. Then also we have in the big book, the bedevilments, which are on page 52. I'm prey to misery and depression. I can't control my emotional natures, personal relationships, the bedevilments, if you guys are familiar with them. And then we have the promises on page 83, I believe it is, wherever the promises are. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through, right? But what I got to see, what I was doing is that I had created all these charts, right? I still had prey to misery and depression. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I couldn't make a living. I didn't feel like I was of use to other people, right? So I started asking myself, based on the bedevilments, I hope this is making sense. Based on the bedevilments, can I see the promises now? Have the promises come true in my life? Am I so self-centered and caught up in all of this other stuff that I can't see the promises coming true in my life because I'm living in the bedevilments, right? So I started looking at the promises and I started asking myself, has this come true for me? Without reading them and saying, yeah, it's come true for me. It's like, has this really happened for me, right? If I am painstaking about this phase of my development, I would be amazed before I'm halfway through. Well, am I amazed now? Am I amazed? And then I go back and I look at the bedevilments and I see, am I prey to misery and depression? Answer is no. Right? Do I still like I can't be useful to other people? No. Right? Am I having problems with personal relationships? Nowhere near like I used to. And in me looking at the promises and looking at the bedevilments, man, I could see his higher power working. It just worked with me. I can't believe the person that I am. I can't believe all of this stuff. And I know I didn't do it myself. It's like, how do I miss that in 34 years of sobriety? How can I miss the waking moments of my higher power? It's easy for me to see the other stuff. You make me mad at the grocery store, even in AA at the meetings, you're getting on my nerves. You sharing too much. You ain't stopping when the timer go off. I can find all those irritations that we have. But on my everyday living, when I get up and come in here and have prayer meditation, I get up, right? A person like me from the hood, I'm living in a nice house. I come in here and my first thought is to do prayer meditation. It's like, who am I to be thinking that way? Then I get in my car, right? And this is the cold part about it that I was thinking about. You know how many liquor stores I pass? You know how much I'm around liquor, but I don't even really pay attention to it. It's like, I go to the grocery store, there's liquor in the grocery store. I go to a party, there's liquor everywhere. I go out to restaurants and eat, there's liquor. Now you got liquor in your food. Now they got liquor at the movie theater. It's everywhere. But what happens with me? I go to the movie theater, I want some popcorn. And I want some M&Ms in my popcorn. And I want a big tall glass of water, right? What happens to me when I go to a restaurant? I want that calamari or that the shrimp and stuff like that. And give me some water. I'm not thinking about no wine. It's like I didn't change my mind like that. When I go to the grocery store, I can walk down the aisle where the alcohol is. Because I'm trying to get that vanilla creamer for my coffee. I ain't thinking about that. It's like, did I do that for myself? No, I didn't do that. So when I do my review, I have to see, not only do I review my day and I see the 12 and 12 talks about there's not a day where there's no black ink, right? There's not a day. So if I look at the red ink, which is, okay, yeah, I probably should have spoke to her. No, I probably shouldn't have cut the guy off on the freeway. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have had an attitude because my boss told me to do this. I could also see that I opened the door for Sally. That I said, good morning, you look beautiful today. That I really was a productive member on my job and did my work that they told me to do. In all of that, that's where the God shots are. The God shots are in all of that all day. When I come home, it's like I was doing stuff like this. I was coming home from AA meetings, right? And I was ignoring my wife. I spent more time talking to somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, and my wife wanted to talk about her hair, But I don't want to hear what she's talking about with her hair because I just spent 2 hours talking to a newcomer. And the God shot that I got with my wife was, it's like, look, you pray for this in your sex ideal, right? And this is what came for you. You got a wife that you could really kick it with, and it's just a great experience. All she want to do is tell you about her hair products. And you don't want to listen to her, but you'll get on the phone with somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous and stay on the phone with them for hours and hear them. And you don't even know these people, but you'll do that for them. But I'd ignore my wife, ignore my dog, ignore, just wasn't really grounded. So I had to start really making some adjustments and seeing God in all of my affairs. And when I started seeing that the fourth dimension grew so much for me, I can't even begin to tell you. It's like, I don't want to miss a day, right? And I know we won't have those moments of like, where is God? Where are my shots? Where are my God shots at? Yeah, I see I need to change this. Yeah, I see I need to make an amends. I need to do some writing on this. But where is God? Where am I missing it? As much as I'm able to look at other stuff, I want to start shifting my consciousness to the God shots, right? So moving along, right? This is the other thing that happened. In the 11th step, I decided to turn the 11th step into a prayer because I was having issues still with some of the religious prayers that I grew up with. And I was able to see, even in the prayers, like the God shots, because I was like, how is it that I can start balancing more of God into, we're not talking about like airy fairy, like, Holy Spirit, we're not talking about la, 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 la. We're talking about just practical stuff of what my higher power does for me on a daily basis. How could I see it? Through our step work, right? So in the 11th step, and the 7th step prayer is a great prayer for me. The 7th step prayer says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. What did it say? Good and bad. Right? All of it. So the good on Tuesday can be the bad on Friday 5 years later, depending on what the character defect is. So the character defect can be an asset on Friday, but a defect on Tuesday 6 years later. So it's not my business how it operates. It's that I give it all to the higher power, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character, not everything that's great. Remove every single defective character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Usefulness to not just people at AA, usefulness to my wife, usefulness to my cat, usefulness to my neighbors, usefulness to my job, usefulness to myself, not from an ego-centered place, but from a place of I need to get some sleep, doing some fun stuff. My very fun thing to do. I love Prime TV and Netflix. And, I like watching series, like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. It's okay to just sit at the house and chill with a bacon cheeseburger and some French fries and Game of Thrones. Man, shoot. They have you a piece of cheesecake after that. Don't answer the phone. Don't do nothing. And just chill. And don't get you a chocolate muffin. That'll really set it off. It's okay to do these things. In my prayer, I'm going to tell you what I did to the 11th step prayer. And then I think I'm going to shut it down because I think you get the message of if I get in the way, I miss my God shots. If I get in the way, I miss my God shots. My ego, my self-centeredness can be so into being a great AA'er and not doing selfishness and not doing dishonesty and not doing self-seeking. I want to be a great commitment person. I want to make the coffee right. I want to be the best secretary. I can get so caught up in that I'm not relaxing and taking it easy. Right? So the 11th step prayer says this, and I say this prayer every day. I turn it into a prayer. Lord, I ask that you direct my thinking. I especially ask that it be divorced from selfish, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. I pray that my thought life is placed on a much higher plane as my thinking is cleared of wrong motives. I pray if I face any indecision, if I'm not able to determine which course to take, I pray for inspiration, intuitive thought, or a decision. I pray that I relax and take it easy, that I don't struggle, knowing that the right answers will come after I've tried this for a while. I pray that what used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of my mind. I pray that I'm always inspired to do your will, that I stay in the right action, knowing that faith without works is dead. I pray I see all through the day what my next steps are to be, that I be given whatever I need to take care of any problems. I especially pray for freedom from self-will, not to be caught up in my own selfish ends. I pray that I'm quick to see where other spiritual and religious people are right, that I make use of what they have to offer. I pray that I'll pause when agitated or doubtful, that I ask you for the right thought and the right action, that I constantly remind myself I'm no longer running the show, saying many times throughout the day, your will, not mine, be done. Please protect me from dangerous excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions. I pray that I don't tire so easily, that I don't burn up energy foolishly trying to arrange life to suit myself. I ask that you discipline me in the way that you see fit, and that I stay in the right action, knowing that faith without works is dead. I created that prayer because I didn't want to start telling God what to do. I didn't want to say, God, do this, do that. Because in the midst of me telling God to do that, I put a condition on what God should do. I like to ask. And that's why I love our 11th step, because our 11th step, it just has it all bottled up in there. And that's where I got my prayer from. So in closing, I just want to say the God shots is that if I get quiet and I make a commitment, because with this work that we have, right, you could get the undertone and it could get on your nerves if you always looking at what's wrong with you, what you ain't doing, what you didn't do yesterday, what you should have did last night, what you should have did, your head's like, it's exhausting. So I remember, and it say in the big book, it says, you review your day, you review your night. Another thing about that too, now newcomers, don't listen to me, okay? Don't listen to me. Don't listen to me. But there's a lot of newcomers that are great. But I have to be honest, right? So I remember when I used to come home to review my day at night. This is when we retire at night, right? Review our day. I used to sit there and go, okay, I'm reviewing my day. And by the time it was like 8 o'clock at night and I'm ready to go to bed, I'm trying to kick it with baby. I said, I wasn't resentful at her. I'm not really mad about that. Is there something that should be discussed at once? I don't think I need to talk about that. I've been doing this. I know what to do. I'm sober long enough. I don't need to discuss that. What? By the time it's time to go to bed, I'm not doing no review at night that's really grounded in any honesty. So it's like, okay, well, let me start writing it. So okay, let me write. So, about 9 o'clock this morning, I think I honked and flipped the guy off on the freeway. I probably need to adjust my behavior. And then it's like, okay, what else and I'm not being honest because I really don't want to do it, right? So I tried different things, and thank God for the 12 and 12. Now, there's some great people who do the retire at night. I got some sponsees who write that stuff out. Bam. But it was like, for me, it was like, oh my God, it was hard. So in the 12 and 12, it talks about, and even in step 10, it talks about continue to watch, right? Continue to watch. It's like, yeah, return at night is what they ask us to do, but continue to watch. And so that worked more for me to watch, continue to watch, and to pause when agitated or doubtful. And, you could do like a spot check inventory throughout the day. The 12 and 12 introduced us to a spot check inventory. That works for me. So when I started applying that, because I realized I was missing some when the retired at night stuff, then I would still be getting in resentments, right? So to continue to watch. So in the middle of the day, it's like something happened at work. I can't like write it down over. So I'll text a friend, hey man, I need to talk to you about this. And this is a muscle that I had to build up. So I'll be like, oh, I need to talk to my sponsor. Hey, text my sponsor. Hey, remind me to talk to you about this. My sobriety brother. Hey man, I'm feeling weak. I feel like I'm gonna cheat on my girl. Here, And so I started getting into practices. And I'm gonna say this in close. This last 3 years, I had this situation where all this time I've been with my wife, man, we've been together almost 20 years. And I ended up getting this attraction, right? And it lasted for a long time. It was an obsession. First time I ever been faithful to anybody, but you know how it's just, I just had this attraction. I couldn't shake it. And I told everybody about it. I told my sponsees. I told my sponsors. I have some of the best sponsors ever. Yes, I have 2 sponsors. They're the best. And I told my sobriety fan, I said, hey, man, look, I'm attracted to this girl. And if something don't happen, I'm doing this. Yeah, it happened to me. And they was like, well, you know what they do. You know how everybody talk to you and stuff. But I got the support that I need. God shot, right? God shot. The illusion and delusion, the fantasy did not match my reality. The fantasy in my head didn't match the reality of what was true. I created a story in my head about what the situation was, and it wasn't even real. And that's why we have to cooperate with this stuff to activate. Now, how do I cooperate? I cooperate because I tell myself, no secrets. I called my sponsor up. I told her, I said, look, I'm doing this. I can't help it. I'm attracted. This is what I want to do. But by me telling her, it just did something to the whole situation. Now I won't go into details about all of that. But what ended up happening was I got to see the truth about what I was getting ready to do in my household, what I was getting ready to lose. And thank God I still have my wife. Thank God I didn't run off in this situation. It would have been a hot mess, right? So this is what we still do. One day at a time, old timer, newcomer. I'm going to say this and shut up for real. I would suggest you join me on the journey of what is your chart? Where are you missing your God shots? And one of the charts I have to remind the women that I sponsor, I say, look, you guys, what page, like let's say I got a sponsor that called me one time and she was like, I'm so sick of this and I'm so sick of that and some stuff going on in the meetings. And I said, well, what page is that on? And she was like, well, old timers ain't supposed to act like that. Old timers shouldn't do this. And I said, what chart is in our big book that says, if you got 30 years, you shouldn't be like this? When you got 30 years, you should act like that. By the time you turn 5 years, you should be here. Where is that written in our books? We live one day at a time. We all have grave emotional and mental disorders. So where is this chart? You mad at the old timer? The timer went off and she wouldn't shut up because she the old timer. Okay. You the leader of the meeting. Tell the old timer, look, the timer went off. Please respect the damn timer. You get to tell her, I'm the timer. The timer went off. I know you're an old timer. I respect that. But please respect the timer. The meeting is only an hour. We'd like for everyone to share, right? Stop the charts. Stop the rules you made in your head about how we're supposed to be in AA or not be in AA, because then you're going to think yourself up out of here. And we all have a seed here, one day at a time. God could and would if he were soft. Thanks for letting me share, y'all. I'm done.
Thank you so much for that, Patty. That was amazing. Really compelling and engaging. And they're quite emotive too. I'm sure there's quite a few people who are welling up just like you as well. I'm afraid God shots doesn't sound so good with my accent. I mean, you really knocked it out of the park with that one. That was great.